Mr. Begley, members of the board, we do have several items for board discussion this evening. Mrs. Howard will be covering our first two items, staffing update and a performance contract for our food services director. So I'll turn it over to Mrs. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Begley, members of the board, I did want to give you a quick staffing update. As you can see by our employment that you just improved, we have been very busy to ensure that we're filling all of our needed positions as we go into next school year. However, as we mentioned in a previous board meeting, we are looking very closely at student numbers as staff members resign or retire for any opportunities for financial cost savings through attrition. I'm happy to report that since we last spoke, as we look at projected student numbers for next school year, we've been able to identify 5 full-time elementary teaching positions that at this time we do not need to move forward in filling, and that will be an approximate cost savings for the district of $500,000. Additionally, Dr. Rice has worked very closely with the high school administration, and they've identified a way to serve our students who are in need of credit recovery through an existing program with our existing staff, eliminating the need for us to hire an additional staff member for that. Just wanted to share that update with you and ask if you had any questions in regards to that.
Thank you.
Of course. Moving on to our second item here. My second item for board discussion is to let you know that on this board agenda, there's an item for board action recommending a 5-day performance contract for our new food services director, Katie Lozier, who you just met. She does not officially start in that role until July 1, and to ensure that she's able to get properly trained by the current food service director before she leaves, a short performance contract is needed. This will ensure a smooth transition for Mrs. Lozier and the food services department. Just wanted to make you aware and see if you had any questions in regards to that.
No, I think that's valuable. You know, those will be 5 valuable days to spend time with the current director.
She's very excited to get in there. She'd like to get into the kitchens while they're still active and just see how everything runs. So.
Right, great idea.
Yep, I think it makes sense to see some hands-on from the experienced person.
All right, our next two items for board discussion will be covered by Dr. Rice, some board policies and also extracurricular review committee recommendations for 22-23, maybe 23-24. Maybe. I'll turn it over to Dr. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, Mr. Begley, members of the board. Under letter C, items for board discussion, number 3, board policies. I have 4 pieces of policy for discussion, letters A through D. In your board packet, I have included copies of previous language and the proposed language as per OSBA. Under letter A, policy IGBEB, which is the dyslexia intervention and supports. This is a new policy. Districts have been reviewing for quite some time now the new dyslexia requirements. This policy is the newest version that outlines district obligations. House Bill 583 revised the requirements and delayed the required implementation timeline. Districts are now required to comply with the provisions. So there's a lot with this. We're still learning more about it. We're still waiting on ODE to give us more, but this is the latest version of that. Are there any questions under policy IGBEB? Under letter B, IGCH-R and LEC-R, College Credit Plus. I feel like we have this one about every 3 months as the state changes things. House Bill 554 enacted a new Ohio Revised Code 3365.036 that impacts the enrollment of military students in CCP courses. Under the new provisions, children of military families enrolled in CCP who must withdraw from the school because of a permanent change of station and order from one military installation to another must either be allowed to complete participation in the course through an online format, if possible, or withdraw from the course without academic or financial penalty. Please let me know if there are any questions with that one. Under letter C, JHBG, reporting child abuse. This is a new policy. Senate Bill 288 makes several changes to the in-service training requirements for Ohio school districts. We anticipate more information about this law and its requirements for how we approach the subject with students at a later date, as we are waiting for additional clarification from ODE on those requirements before we adopt that new policy language. For now, this policy addresses the training that must take place for all staff members. Please let me know if there are any questions with JHG. Finally, under letter D, JED, this is another one that we seem to update pretty regularly. We're continuing to clean up language post-pandemic while we're also listening to our clerks who interact daily with the courts and truancy officers, updating this policy to make sure that we're meeting what they need to do their jobs effectively. Please let me know if there are any questions for JED. Under letter E, this is a different one, policy KMA-R. This is on the agenda to allow the superintendent or designee to be given permission to what we'll call OK FCSD employees to serve and support organizations, i.e. booster groups, in leadership roles on a case-by-case basis. In the policy from OSBA, it states district officials or employees cannot serve in these leadership roles for support organizations without prior authorization from the board. In conversations with Ms. Lane and Mr. Clemens, we thought it appropriate for the board to give the okay one time rather than each time we have one of these cases to be bringing it to the board. So we will review each of these potential conflicts of interest and make a determination at that time should they be allowed to serve in these leadership positions for booster organizations. Any questions with that one?
Do we see any ramifications about how this might tie in with the new laws regarding campaign, how a district employee can participate in a campaign? Some of these booster groups may be raising funds for campaign.
That hasn't come up in conversation at all.
I'm not aware of that being an issue.
Okay, all right, great.
It's a good question, though.
As crazy as that got, you know.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Continuing on under number 4, extracurricular review committee recommendations. I have 14 recommendations that the committee would like to move forward with. To highlight a few items with this process, the committee makeup is equal parts FCTA members and administration. This year, there were 28 total applications. The committee approved those listed for a number of reasons, including increase in student participation, meaning we needed more adult support. There were clubs that have been running unofficially for a number of years where these adults are overseeing students, or there is a redesign in coaching duties and responsibilities. Please let me know if you have any questions over any of the recommendations. That concludes all items I have for consideration under items for board discussion. Thank you.
Our next item for board discussion, Safe Route to Schools project. I'll turn it over to Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Begley, members of the board, the City of Fairfield has received funding from the Safe Route to School grant. This grant was awarded through the Ohio Department of Transportation. Approximately 3 years ago, the City of Fairfield requested some information from the district that was used in the process for this award to be granted. These funds will be used to supply sidewalks to connect a few of our schools. This summer, sidewalks will be installed from the front of Crossroads on Donald Drive down near the Academy, crossing over Donald to Busway. The sidewalk will continue on the left side of Busway, and then coming up, crossing North Gilmore, continuing across the front of the freshman school, all the way down until turning left up on Holden Boulevard, stopping at the traffic light of FHS and Compass. So the traffic light right out here. So there is some sidewalks from that run, and this is all connecting. So students could utilize sidewalks from Crossroads Middle School all the way to Compass Elementary. This is great news for our community, and wanted to reiterate that all the funding was provided through the Safe Route to Schools grant, and the City of Fairfield will manage the entire project. The tentative completion is mid-August, and they're hoping to have it done before the first day of school. In addition, the district is actively providing similar information requests from Fairfield Township. The township is actively preparing to submit for a Safe Route to Schools grant as well that will be focused around near both North and East elementary schools. And in fact, this week they were out with their architectural firm doing observations for drop-off and pickup, which is part of the process to develop their safety plan. The transportation safety plan that they utilize to identify is it sidewalks or other improvements in the area, and then they submit that, and the hope is they actually work with ODOT during that process. So I actually expect to be coming back and talking about that in a couple of years, happening with the township as well.
Great, great. I struggled a little bit to follow the exact path you laid out, but
Okay.
how many, does this hopefully consolidate where they have to cross the road?
Well, what it'll do is, yes, it will consolidate it, and then when they do have to cross the road, there will be proper crosswalks installed. And there's additional discussion around adding where Jungles is, right there at that entrance. So they've observed that a lot of students actually cross right there, which is a very unsafe place.
Right.
So they're actively trying to develop an additional crosswalk there, but where to put it? Because part of the discussion they had was if you come out that entrance right there to the freshman building in high school, kind of where at that hybrid, that a lot of kids go just straight across there, where the safest place would be to lead them down about 15 to 20 feet from that neck and then bring them over that way. And if they did that, they talked about putting up like flashers and other items to make it more identifiable. And but a lot of thought's been put into this from the city. It's really good stuff.
Well, that's great to hear, because that North Gilmore area was where I was thinking would be problematic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
awesome. Thank you.
All right, our last item for board discussion this evening is the 5-year forecast. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Boy, it feels like we just did this. But here it is May already, and here is the update to our 5-year forecast. So I know every time I present this, you will see this same slide to remind our community and our board members about engaging. This is for our long-range planning of our school district. It also serves as a basis for determining the school district's ability to sign what they call the 412 certificate. And lastly, it provides a method for the Department of Education and the auditor state to identify some school districts with potential financial problems. So our revenues for this school year remain very highly percentage-wise in property taxes and state aid. Those two sources make up about 91% of our revenue. We are anticipating for this year to end with $103,637,000 in revenue. That is slightly higher than what we had projected in November, and because of some slightly increased tax collections and some, what I'll say, great interest rates on our investments, we've gained some interest income, so that's that we hadn't projected in November, so that's positive for us. Hot topic, property taxes right now. If anybody has read the Journal News lately, almost every day there's been an article about these huge increases that people are expecting in property values. The Butler County Treasurers had a presentation by Nancy Nix and Mike Stein from the Butler County Auditor's Office last week. We were able to ask them some questions. They gave us some feedback. And as of last week, the thought was that on average, the Butler County districts may realize a 42% average property value increase. Today, if you read the paper, we have some legislators that are trying to present some ways for that not to happen. So that's been presented, I believe, to the House, Senate right now. Probably won't know anything until after the budget bill gets approved. So I'm going to go with what I learned last week, and I'm taking it 40% for our district to be the increase for residential properties. And the reason being, Fairfield and Westchester were at the higher end of those increases 3 years ago. So we believe that trend may continue, but on average, they feel that 42% may be the end result. Again, yet to be determined. One thing I need to emphasize to everybody, though, is that does not mean that your tax bill will go up 40%. And I just want to make a comment. There's some information on the Butler County Auditor's website, some frequently asked questions. I would recommend that people, if they need more information, to go out and read that information, because I think it may help with the understanding. Because of House Bill 920, our district is not allowed basically to collect more money than when the levy was first passed. Now, there are we get additional revenue from new construction and some other things, but for us, if 40% ends up to be the value at the end of the year, which we won't know this until the end of November, beginning of December probably, it may give us a slightly 3.4% increase in property tax collections for next year. So it's not a huge amount of money, but there is a possible increase for us slightly for next year, and then maybe 2.8% for fiscal year '25. So again, Butler County Auditor's website has some good information. I would recommend people to go out there and read that. So these are real estate projections for the next 4 years. So for this year, you're seeing about $47.1 million for our total collections. Second piece of revenue that we talk about usually each time is our unrestricted state aid, our fair school funding. We are, as of right now, using everything that is in law, and that all can change in about a month and a half. So right now, fair school funding plan is in place. That's what's in the projections. For this year, we're looking at maybe about $166,000 more coming in than what we had projected in November. There are a couple of items I'm going to touch on at the end of this presentation about the fair school funding plan and how, if some things change, we may see some additional dollars for our district. So I'll get to that in just a minute. So our total collections, we are expecting for this year to be about $33 million. Slightly, as you can see, kind of some dips a little bit, and that's due to some projections of enrollment for us. If we go down, we have ebbs and flows a little bit with our enrollment. That may change, of course, as we get to those years. So our total projected annual revenue for this year, again, is $103,637,989. Next year, you see a little bit of growth, but then after that, it's pretty much flat revenue for our district. Moving on to expenditures for this year. Again, as you see, salaries and benefits make up about 77% of our total budget. We are estimating some expenditures to come in a little bit higher than what we had projected in November, and that's mainly in our salaries category. We have had additional retirements this year over what we had last year, and those accrued wages that employees usually receive in July and August are all going to be paid out in June this year. So we were not aware of that back in November. I mean, how many people decided to retire this year? So that does come into play for this year. And this is just a review of what I presented in November. We have 2.5% increases for all our staff for this year and 2% increases for the remaining years of the forecast. Our teacher negotiations, we wrapped up already, so that's been taken care of. We are in the process of negotiating with our support staff at the moment. For next year, several things that Ms. Howard brought up as far as some reductions. You can see we need 3 additional special education teachers, a preschool teacher, a psychologist and an intervention specialist that have been paid out of those American Rescue Plan funds are now going to be switched back to general fund because those funds are running out. But then you also see a lot of the reductions we've presented to the board in the past couple of months, along with a restructure of our English learning program. For 24-25 school year, the 4 technology integration coaches that we have now are being paid out of ESSER funds. Those funds, of course, are going away, so those will be shifted back to, sorry about that. Shifted back to general fund. Again, we're going to experience another bit of a restructure of our EL program for 24-25, reducing some tutors, but then adding a teacher for that year. And then we are seeing possible needs for an EL teacher for fiscal year '26 and '27. Those are the only positions that we have added to the forecast. Total projections for personnel are on the screen. We're looking at about $65.5 million this year in total cost. That increasing for '24 by about 3.4%, and then about 4% increase for fiscal year '25. So employee benefits kind of go hand in hand with salaries. We've included all those reductions and increases to positions. Those costs are included in here. We are still projecting some double-digit increases for our benefits. I actually attended a meeting yesterday, and the good news is they feel that claims have kind of stabilized this year. So hopefully, we may see less than a 15% increase for the next couple of years, but time will tell. They also are looking at changing, modifying some of the benefits to help reduce those increases to our premiums. So we'll see how that turns out for us. We also, under our IDEA grant, do not have enough money to pay for all the benefits associated with those personnel that are paid out of that grant. So the general fund must pick up those expenses. So that's about $312,000 this year. I've also included about $400,000 for the remaining years to cover those benefits. Kind of the same type of trajectory that we had with our salaries follows in with our benefits. And our total annual expenditures for this year, a little over $114 million are projected. So as you can see, over the next couple of years, expenses are outpacing our revenue, and our fund balance basically disappears in June 30th, 2026. So our financial summary for this year looks like we will have a cash balance at the end of June of about $43.7 million. As you can see, we've had some improvement over those next couple of years based on all the reductions we've made and some of the capital improvements that we've shifted around or delayed. So it's about a $5 million difference than what I had presented in November to you for the 2025 year. A couple other things to consider. That state budget that always comes into play. A big part of that, the largest part of that foundation funding is what they call base cost inputs. There's 22 different elements. Those get categorized into 5 subcomponents, and we can go on and on and on how they do all this. But basically, the calculation of the base cost, they're utilizing FY 2018 numbers. Okay, so that doesn't, I know it doesn't make sense, Mrs. Shorter. The House's proposal says that they would like the formula to use the 2022 base cost inputs. For our district, that's significant. That's $5 million, could be $5.1 million increase next year, and then another $5 million the following year. If after those 2 years in the next budget, they update those base cost amounts again to the 2024 figures, then we would recognize even another increase from there. But that's not law yet, so that's why that's not in the forecast. So I am proposing to the board that you approve tonight's forecast, and then once the budget bill gets approved, hopefully by July 1, I'll come back at our meeting in July, give you an updated forecast, and then we can make some decisions have more discussion, make some decisions based on our financial position after that forecast is presented. There's just a lot of variables right now, and I think it would be in our best interest to wait and see how everything shakes out. I added an appendix to our forecast this time. It's the very last page. It kind of goes into a little bit, shows you some projections of that state if the budget gets passed. You might want to take a look at that and that's just our state aid revenue. I just want to point that out. That's not total revenue. But I'm hoping for the best for this budget bill. If they update those to 22 base costs, it will help our district. I can take any questions the board has.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. Could you go back and touch on that 22 base cost versus the 18? Why are they using the 18, 2018?
I don't know, Mr. Clark. Honestly, that wasn't the Fair School Funding Plan's present proposal in the beginning. You know, those base cost inputs were supposed to increase over time with the formula, with the funding formula, and it hasn't happened. The governor came out with saying that, oh, we'll use the 2018, his proposal is using the 2018 base cost inputs. The House is saying, no, you need to use the 22. I don't know what the Senate's going to do. So the school community, some of my peers believe that the Senate will use the 22 base cost inputs. Again, though, we never know until it's final.
Thank you for that. I mean, I knew the answer. I just wanted to kind of clarify that it, you know, it's not us.
No,
Like, we,
no.
I mean, this is like obvious that what needs to be done. So, but thank you so much. Appreciate it. It's a lot of work. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. One is a comment, and it is phantom revenue. How much information are we putting out in the public to explain phantom revenue with House Bill 920? Because information, I've seen it on Facebook, the information about the property tax increases, that information is out there, and I don't know if people have really researched it. But I think it is really important to emphasize that the school district is not getting a proportional type number in that. I mean, 4% versus the 40%, those are things that I think really need to be cleared up somehow. I don't know if we could somehow put some type of newsletter out to the public, if we could get that out to the public, which is like a financial state of the district, like a, you know, just a newsletter that really goes into the finances of this, because this is going to hit hard, and people are already talking about, well, just putting information out there that's not accurate, and it would be to our detriment for them to continue to have those misleading assertions.
I'll answer that with, sometimes every district is different. So you've probably heard, and Nancy Nix tries to address this in one of her press releases on the website, on the auditor's website. Depending on if you're at the 20 mil floor, which we are not, and Lakota is not, but other districts are, it makes a difference.
In that increase.
And that's, it's hard to explain. House Bill 920, the whole phantom revenue piece, is a very difficult thing to explain. I'll be honest. And it's, I don't know how, no matter what you put out, if everybody's going to understand it. I mean, we can at least, we could try that. It's just, you know, you don't want people to take things and apply it to their district because it may not apply to their district, just like the 20 mil floor. We're not at the 20 mil floor, that doesn't apply to us. So some districts may receive an increase in property taxes because of the 20 mil floor, where we may not. So it's very unique, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's easy to explain, because it's not. But that's, I'm more than happy to try to help people understand.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if something that's tailored and dedicated to just the finances, the 5-year forecast is good, but it's a lot of information for people to digest. But if it's something that's really tailored to just those few, you know, critical things, maybe that would go a long way. I would like to see something like that. Did you guys like to see something like that?
I hear what you're saying, and it's so easy for the general public to read that taxes could be going up 40% and not even understand that statement, but to quickly make the analogy that, well,
We're going to get the benefits.
right, if taxes are going up 40%, then the schools are getting 40% more, and that's certainly not the case.
Yeah, and that's, that was just the one comment. I do have a question. There's a lot of conversation, of course, about, I think it was Senate Bill 11. With Senate Bill 11, if it makes it out into, I don't know, out into, I guess, the voting domain, what would be the impact? Now, that is the Parents Educational Freedom Act, which is essentially vouchers. What would be the impact of that? Do you think that that would guide more towards the 2018 type numbers, or would they be fair? And
I don't know.
I mean,
I can't
is
answer
it-
that. I don't know. I mean,
Is it a game changer as far as that outlook?
again, I try to focus on what is in law right now, and that's the best we can do, because
Right.
all the what-ifs, I mean, if you take what first came out with all the changes they were going to make, and now things have kind of narrowed down to what they're really, really interested in changing, you know, I could spend all my time trying to do that, and that's not really, for me,
Yeah, you don't have the time.
a good use of my time right now. I want to focus on what's going on in our district and try to help, you know, think of ways we can reduce cost and keep things flowing for everybody.
Right. Yep. I
And
understand.
I would just add that Nancy and I have, especially the last 2 to 3 weeks, as she has worked on this forecast, and she mentioned some of the variables, and it's so difficult to keep up with all of the things that they say might happen. And she and I will sit down and have these conversations. Well, if this happens, and literally it's A, B, C, and D. And so it's hard to try to think that far ahead when you're not really sure what tomorrow may bring.
Right.
And that's why this forecast, I mean, has been such a challenge for her, and as we are trying to have conversations about the future planning for the district, it's just been the biggest challenge. And it's unbelievable to me that, you know, you have to try to put this forecast together in May with all of these uncertainties, a few of which you mentioned tonight, and then we will have to come back in July because there is so much uncertainty, and have these same conversations again. So once again, as a district, we have to press pause on our planning, and not because we can't make decisions on how we need more information, we need facts before we can make hard decisions about what we want to do in the future. And it's always a challenge, but now more than ever, it feels like it just gets to be more challenging each year, you know, for a number of reasons. We've had so many conversations over the years about vouchers, and, you know, there's still so much uncertainty about where that will go. And at one point, it was just districts on a list, and now there's discussion about vouchers for all, regardless if your school is on the list or not. And I could talk about that topic for quite some time, but I will refrain from doing so. But so we'll just continue to have those conversations and keep an eye on the future, but also what will impact us immediately. And just that alone is hard to keep up with. And Nancy does a great job, and I've watched her, you know, with all these papers all over her desk for weeks now, and we'll sit and have those conversations. Well, what about this?
I
mean, should
cleaned
we
my
do
desk
that?
today, just so
You
you
know.
know.
No judgment, Nancy. So I just wanted to add a little tidbit of information, so.
Absolutely. Any other comments? Yeah, I think the futility of a 5-year forecast when they can't tell us what the biannual budget's going to be, and then here locally, all of the issues over the property tax, and that's 24%, it's 42%, it's going to be lower, it's just,
And you're not going to know anything until December, probably, as to how that all shakes out. So,
that's
got a long ways to go.
based on a calendar year, and we have a fiscal year, it's just lots of challenges. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.